Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Large Format Photography Podcast. My name is Simon Forster and I'm joined by my co-host Andrew Bartram. Hello Andrew.
Hello Simon.
Right, now before we get going, I just want to say thank you to Joseph Brunges for being a great guest in episode 11. So thank you for being with us, Joseph. It was great fun. Now, talking of guests, we've mentioned a few times that Steve Lloyd from Chroma Camera and Jason Lane of Pictoriographica, the maker of dry plates, are people that we want to get onto the show. And today, we've got both of them for the price of one. So, hello Steve.
Hiya.
And hello Jason.
Yo, what's up?
They must have something to sell, otherwise they wouldn't both be on here, that's all I can say.
Have you two guys come along to plug products?
As if we would do that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's like, I don't know if talk shows in America are like they used to be here. There was a couple of long-standing talk shows in the probably late 80s, early 90s, and one of them was by the late and much loved Terry Wogan. And you know, they towards the end they just used to have a stream of American guests and authors, British authors, American authors, and they were just there because they had books out or films out. You know, there was no guests there, just who came on with any integrity at all.
Well, I can honestly say I don't have a book or a film, so is that okay?
Yeah, I'll just leave that hanging there.
I feel bad now.
Hey, do you guys need some dry plates?
Well, let's just for our listeners, so they understand that Steve can't be with us through the whole of this recording. So I think because of that, we're going to go straight in and talk to Steve a little bit more about the Chroma Camera, and that's something that both Andrew and I came across for the first time in March, was it, at the photography show earlier this year?
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to say, it's a really, really nice camera. But Steve, perhaps you might want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got to the point of being a camera maker.
Yeah, sure. Okay, where to start? So I think camera maker was I've always kind of built things. I started when I was much younger. My dad is a modeler. He's into American sort of trains and models. So myself and my brother kind of grew up using power tools and all sorts. So we kind of started on radio control vehicles. We used to make cars, boats, planes, all sorts. And then as I got older, I moved on to full-size cars. So we used to build custom cars. I had a few minis and things and various styles of cars. And then I went on to a house and built a house. And then the cameras kind of came after that, mainly because I then had kids and couldn't afford cars anymore. So I had to go smaller. So cameras came into that. So I built various kind of one-off custom cameras. I've got a very active imagination. I think that's half the problem. So I've built various kind of single one-off medium format cameras. I've done a large format conversion on a Polaroid 110. Various things, but then Chroma came about because I was kind of dared into doing it in the pub, which is never a good idea. I was on a film meet with a group of people from Talk Photography that I've always kind of run build threads on the forum there of the latest camera I was building, kind of thing. Just it kind of helped my mind to put things down on a thread. So say we were in a pub and we were talking about cameras, and one of the guys there sort of asked me about large format and building something from scratch. And I'd always had this idea in the back of my mind that I'd like to design something that was entirely mine on sort of on screen and then physically. So on the train on the way back from I think it was the Peak District we were in then, I started designing the camera. A friend of mine runs a laser cutting company. So that was where the idea came with looking at laser cut materials, and I started off with wood. I built some early kind of MDF versions as tests, and then moved into acrylic. And then all the fun involved in design and developing that took about 2 years of various versions. I've got a workshop with about 20 different chromas sitting there of various designs, and they started off really simple, and now they're the other end of the scale. And then obviously the campaign. So yeah, so I think that's probably a very potted history of me.
Okay, well, just interesting in the design process that you went through. You know, you've done many versions to get to where you're at, and I think even through the period of the Kickstarter the successful Kickstarter, I should say, that you did. I think the camera that ultimately that's been delivered or still being delivered now are not quite the same as where they were when they first started. Is that true?
Definitely. The start of the campaign, my camera was there were quite a few sort of changes made to it throughout the campaign. So I think, again, I'm maybe my own worst enemy, but I kind of I don't like to sit still with, if I can see something I can improve. So throughout the campaign, I'd sort of post updates saying, look, you know, I've been looking at it, I've built them, and this doesn't work as well as I'd like it to, so I've changed it to that. So yeah, so when the actual delivered cameras are different to the early images in the campaign, so we've kind of mainly looking at simplifying the assembly. Obviously, I am Chroma on my own, so each camera takes about 5 to 6 hours to build. So where I can kind of streamline the assembly does help, and also for ease of use. You know, the front of the queue is using a camera that you want to use. You know, there's no point in making a camera that people find uncomfortable or I don't like. I mean, quite selfishly, I kind of build the camera around what I would like, but I've also taken a lot of feedback from people throughout the campaign, running up to the campaign as well. Let's say I've got a build thread running on Talk Photography that ran for about 2 years before the campaign. So I've had a lot of really good feedback, tips, advice from people who've got considerably more experience in large form photography than I have. So yeah, it's definitely morphed from the early designs to what it is now.
You sort of echoed something when we had Ethan Moses on the show. I don't know if it was about 6 weeks, a couple of months ago, with his camera dactyl. And one of the things that he certainly learned from that process was that the way that the thing is assembled, he could, if he was to produce it again today with a fresh design, he could put it together in a fraction of the time using far fewer pieces and things like that.
But definitely, you know, I suppose I'm an engineer. I like that side, the kind of the production side as well. So obviously, the fact that I'm building them, it makes sense to make it as streamlined as possible. But definitely, you know, I look back on the ways I've built previous cameras, you know, and if I was building one camera, I think I'd do it differently. I've built cameras differently like that, but as I'm building 100 cameras, I've got to make them efficient and work as well as the other 99, you know. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to develop along, and I've developed a lot of tooling myself as well for as I'm assembling them to make that work. And the bellows as well, they're all laser cut and made by hand as well. So trying to streamline those was quite a challenge.
How are you making the bellows, Steve?
Basically 2 layers. So you've got a single skin. So the outer material is a fire retardant nylon. So I went through about 20 or 30 different materials trying to find one that was light type but also flexible.
Presumably it's fire retardant, not because you want to use it in hazardous conditions.
Yeah.
It just happens to be.
Yeah. I wasn't planning on setting fire to a Chroma.
He's catering to the firefighter market.
Exactly. There's a massive demand, I think. It basically, it turned out that the fire retardant backing is like a rubberized backing on the nylon. So that actually makes it light tight by coincidence. So without making it heavy either. So I laser cut the outer skin, and then the ribs are laser cut adhesive. It's actually leather that's used in car interiors. So the ribs are laser cut in 6 sections as well. So then they can be peeled and stuck to the nylon. So there's no spray adhesive, no waiting for glue to go off, and they don't need a third inner layer either. Most bellows have 3 layers with a cotton inner. So then it's a matter of doing the folding, which is always fun. So yeah, it was just, again, I've gone through about probably 10 or 15 different bellows designs to try and find one that consistently kind of delivers without making my fingers fall off trying to fold them, which is always fun.
You haven't got a workshop full of 6-year-old kids helping you there.
No,
That's
Jason,
what you need, isn't it?
That is what I need. I need to outsource to Jason. I have been talking to another company about supplying the bellows, though, so that's something down the line. That'll be kind of retail post.
How many Chroma cameras? You're in the process of shipping now, are you? Is that right?
Yeah, they're all.
And how many? How many in the end are you committed to sending out from the Kickstarter?
In total, there were 148 cameras.
Wow.
So I'm down to about the last 40. So it's it's been quite a challenge, and I've been eternally grateful for the patience that people have shown on the campaign, because obviously I started the campaign never really expected that kind of interest in cameras. I was kind of basing my numbers around 40 cameras, thinking, that'll be great, 40 cameras is amazing, see what we can do. And I was gonna limit it, but I was advised by a friend of mine that maybe don't limit it, just see what happens. 148 cameras later, so I had a day job as well. I worked full time. I was working in IT, so it was kind of always then evenings and weekends, and when I could get in the workshop. So since the end of July, I've actually left that job now. I've made redundant in that job now, so I'm now entirely Chroma full time, which is what I always wanted, really. So it's nice to be able to dedicate on them now.
You're living the dream.
Yeah, I am.
Maybe
I am. I'm meeting international stars like Jason.
Jesus.
So, are you getting? Where's most feedback coming from? Because I noticed on Twitter. Maybe it's because I'm tuned into certain things on Twitter, but I certainly noticed on Twitter when Ondu supplied their latest Mark III, I think, pinhole cameras, there's loads of people sharing images. I've not seen so many. There's probably more Ondos out there, but are you getting folks sharing stuff? Because
I get quite a lot of stuff on Instagram. It's kind of hard. You're trying to balance across all of the kind of social media, isn't it? You run out of time to do them all, so I end up sometimes kind of focusing on Instagram for a while. People email me direct as well, so I get feedback that way. Talk photography people still. There's about 10 people on there who've got Chromas, so that's really good. So they all give me feedback. I say Twitter, not so much. Really. I do post on there, but not as much. And they say I've got a Chroma mail list as well. So again, people come directly through me that as well.
Has all this camera fixation with making cameras? Has it? What about your personal photography? Are you a large format photographer, or do you just like making them?
A bit of everything, to be fair. I mean, quite honestly, I don't shoot at the moment as much as I'd like to. I like all things. I always take film when we go away or go on holidays and things. And a friend of mine who's got a Chroma as well, we've been saying for a couple of months now, we need to get out. We need to go and shoot some more. And he's busy as well. And it kind of never fits. I think the beauty of large form, which I love about it, is the whole slowing down and taking your time and that. And then I'm fine at the moment. I don't have a lot of time to slow down and take my time. So I also shoot 35mm and medium format. So
I just wondered, because you're so heavily immersed in making these things, whether it's actually in a way had a negative effect on your wanting to get out there with the things, having staring at them all day long. Yeah,
it definitely has. I mean, I think I spend a lot more of my time in the workshop or at the screen doing, some of the marketing side and responding to people and updating people. I'm definitely not getting out as much as I'd like to at the moment. So my kind of plan is everything at the moment is thrown into getting the Kickstarter rewards out. Then once they're out, sorry, go on.
Sorry, you finish. You want they're out?
No, just to say once they're out, I've got a lot of people kind of waiting to be able to buy one, but they're probably going to be more limited numbers. So, a set number a month I'll take orders for, because obviously until I can look at growing, more people. I don't want to be in the same position where I go, yeah, I'll take your orders now, and I've got another order list for 100 cameras, which is amazing, but not when people want them like within 12 weeks, So I'm probably looking at kind of reining that back a little bit down the line. But at the moment, it's full on, and I like it, and it is kind of putting everything into that.
So if it's just you, when you're in the retail position, how many cameras is it possible, given just you? Maybe you outsource the bellows. I don't know, but if that helps.
Yeah, the bellows.
How many a month do you think would you end up making?
I'm looking at the moment. I'm doing the sums and looking at the paper. I'd say I'm probably looking taking orders of maybe 20 cameras a month with a kind of 8 to 12 week lead time then on delivery.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that people have been amazing, have been very patient up to now, but I don't want to take orders and go, right, you'll get this in 6 months' time. I want to be able to give people okay, you've ordered today, you will get it by this date. And the only way to do that is to limit the numbers. So I'd say I'm looking at the moment about 20 a month, I'd say.
Do you want to take a little while for folks out there who are considering getting, because we get a lot of new people both on the Lenses sorry, edit that bit, Simon, on the Large Format Photography Podcast Facebook group, get my teeth in properly, who are new to large format photography, who we try most shows we try and go back to basics a little bit. So why don't you take a little bit of time to sell your camera to the new person, Steve, who might be thinking about, well, do I go and buy a camera off eBay? Do I look at others out there? There's a couple of, certainly I forget who's selling one in kit form at the moment. I saw there's the old Bulldog one, of course, which I think is still being made, but there's a few options, aren't there? So talk about your camera and its and the characteristics, the features that it's got, and why folks may want those particular features.
Okay. The original reasoning behind Chroma was always to make something that's affordable, is good to learn on, so gives you a lot of range of movements. You're not necessarily going to use them all, but they're there to learn, to practice, to see what happens, and to make them unique, hence the sort of the colours on the material. So affordable wise, like you say, you can go on eBay and you can buy any one of 100 different vintage traditional cameras. Generally, you're buying a little bit of an unknown. You're not buying a new product, so you've got more risk, obviously, of what you're getting. You're probably looking at needing service and things like that. So to be able to spend the same amount of money on a brand new camera, which is made for you, to your colours, is good. Learning wise, then say that when I designed Chroma, I wanted to put as much controlled movement in as I could. So that's why on the front standard we've got independent controls for rise, fall, tilt, swing, and shift. So and there's a massive range of movement. Tilt is only limited by the bellows and obviously your lens coverage. Swing is, you're looking at probably, well, again, you're limited by the bellows and lens.
That front standard, you can pretty much have it in any position you want, can't you?
Yeah.
Looking at the photographs.
It will go very extreme.
Not that you'd get probably an image, but
yeah, exactly. So the way it's designed gives that kind of extreme movements. You're not in a kind of a real situation. You're probably not going to need that many movement, that range of movement, should I say? But the option's there, and it's also good for learning because again, you can go to extremes and you can see, okay, well, if I go that far, I can see, the bellows are going to start blocking, or there's vignetting, or the lens coverage. It's a good way to see the extremes of your lens, if you like.
And the front lens panel tilts from the middle. Did we decide that was called axial? Is that what we decided?
That's axial tilt. Yeah. So you got axial tilt, or you got base tilt, haven't you, on most cameras? So axial tilt basically means that you can add tilt without affecting your focus. So you can focus your frame and then tilt. So whereas if you do base tilt, it will physically move the lens forwards or backwards.
Yeah, because I'm used to tilting the lens forward because it's a base on the Toyo, and then just shifting the bellows back or forwards. But after a while, that becomes kind of intuitive. But
I think like anything, isn't it? If you practice it, you get used to your camera. It's I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. It's a different way of doing it. The rear standard has got tilt as well, front and back, as well as rise and fall, which a lot of other cameras don't do rear rise and fall. Now, again, it was something I kind of talked to quite a few people early on when I was designing the camera. It was one of those movements that people said, well, I don't necessarily use it, but I also don't have it available. So
it's a nice to have thing, isn't it? I guess,
That's it. So the idea was I built it into the design. It's there if you want to use it. If you don't, then it's a fixed back. It's up to you, kind of thing. It's this is always my own idea that if the option's there, you can try it in the future. There might be that time and you go, I wish I could raise it by 20 mil, although I can. And I say it's got rear tilt, so it'll go backwards 17 degrees and forwards. Again, you're limited by the bellows and the lens. The focusing bed again gives you about 200 mil of focus movement, so it'll go up to just under 300 mil in length. So again, it covers quite a range of the more common lenses. So you can go down to about a 65 mil lens without a recess board, but obviously movements are going to be.
That's pretty good. I can go down to 90 just, I think, and I have now got a recessed lens board, which makes it a bit easier.
Yeah, you do gain that, don't you, with a bit of movement then at least. But yeah, I mean, it can take a recess board as well. So it uses the sort of Linhof Wister standard lens boards. So I tried to build it around as many existing standards. I mean, large format has got a whole range of standards, hasn't it?
That's the same. I mean, that's quite a common one, isn't it? That sort of Linhof Wister Technica, and it's what the other guys use. Oh, I've just forgotten.
The Intrepid. Yeah, Max uses those as well, So it kind of covers a lot of the bases, and they're quite easy to get hold of. I mean, obviously, I make my lens boards from the same acrylic that's used for the camera, and I can supply additional boards. But I can also take traditional Linhof Wister metal boards as well. The back itself rotates, so the back of the camera is actually secured with 4 neodymium magnets. So to rotate, you literally just disconnect the back, turn it, and click it back in place with the magnets. So it's all very quick to rotate. There's no kind of moving parts inside.
You have a nice ground glass cover, which is a nice addition. You don't always see those sort of things. My Toyo has a door that opens up, and it's got a hood. So the door opens up, and it turns into a viewing hood.
Right.
So that does. But I have another 4.5 which doesn't have any protection over it.
Right. I mean, it was something, to be fair, that I thought, if anyone's going to break it, I will, because I'm probably the most clumsy person I know. So having the kind of the built-in cover seemed like a good idea, and it's cut when the camera's cut as well, so it's part and parcel of it. The back also has integrated Graph-Lock plates, so again, it's made to existing standards, so you can use any Graph-Lock compatible roll film back, or Polaroid 545 or Graphmatics or anything like that. I've
seen those. You mentioned Graphmatics here, so it's a little bit of a tangent, but it'll be quite interesting for folks listening out there. I've hear people refer to these, but are they? These are the Graphmatic backs. I think there's more than one type, but the one I think people refer to holds maybe 6 sheets of film. Is that right? So are they readily available, or what?
Probably as readily available as anything that's 60 years old.
Do you come across them, Simon? Do you come across them in your when you go to camera shows and things?
No, but I've been on the lookout for a sensibly priced one for quite some time now. But it just seemed like a very good idea to have. They won't fit on my Meridian, unfortunately. But
I don't know why you've got that Meridian. I mean, you can't get any movement on it. You can't get any backs on it. It looks pretty, but I think you should sell it and buy a Chroma.
But you hit the nail on the head, though. It looks pretty.
Yeah.
I mean,
Is that you have to commission sale?
yeah, especially with the board that came with it and the Ectar that came with it, which has got some kind of pneumatic bulb release, and so you look at the front of it, it's properly steampunk.
I'll put that in my next design.
Yeah.
I'll put some chrome on it for you.
You'll win me over. In fact, actually, that was one of our conversations where we've been having. And one of the things I really, really like about my Meridian is that it's got geared rise and fall. Yeah. I just love that, and that's something that you've got an eye on, isn't it, for the future?
Yeah, definitely. It's something I've got a few kind of early renders drawn up already for geared, certainly rise and fall, possibly tilt as well. Because on the front and back, because it is something that, like you said, we've talked about a few times, haven't we, when we've met up, that I like that control aspect. It's maybe it's my active mind again. I get it. I'm trying to balance it out over making it still cost effective for people. And the time it's going to have to build.
You went through 2 years of effectively. You went through 2 years of effectively discussing designs, as you said, from people on forums who have been using all different types of field cameras and view cameras for years, and had probably got lots of really useful tips. So, is there the Chroma Mark II? Okay, you mentioned gears, but I would have thought after 2 years and all those discussions, for the price point you've got it at, you're probably there's not going to be that much difference between Chroma Mark II if you're even thinking that far, apart from maybe geared movements.
I mean, I'm to be fair, I mean, prior to the campaign, this is actually probably about Chroma Mark 8, but the actual release. I mean, I was talking to Graham from Sunny 16 as well a couple of months ago, and he was talking as well about a future kind of deluxe version. So again, things like geared movements. And I think one of the key things I've always done with Chroma is to try and kind of personalize cameras to fit around people now, not just colors, but also moving forward. I'm keen to look at kind of being able to add your own features in. So, you may like a geared back, for example, but someone else might go, do you know what? I don't want any rise and fall. I'm not going to use it. I'd rather save the cost or the weight or the complexity of the camera. So I'd like to really offer a very kind of tailored camera, if I could. The camera itself is built in 3 basic modules. So you've got the base, the front, and the back. So my intention has always been to make those kind of not necessarily interchangeable, but at the ordering process to go, right, well, I would really like geared back. I'd really like a, fixed front even, or, static, something else. So that's definitely something I'm looking at down the line. I'm also looking at the materials. I've been speaking to a guy who makes carbon fiber parts. So I've been looking at integrating carbon fiber into it as well as a way to reduce the number of layers of acrylic, because obviously Chroma's built on laminations of acrylic, which makes it really rigid. But if I can use laminations of carbon fiber instead, it means less laminations for the same rigidity, which saves weight, makes it slimmer, things like that. So I've been talking to them recently about swapping out some of the acrylic parts for carbon. So again, that would probably be looking at a kind of a deluxe version, or maybe, short run, couple of cameras, something like that. I'd like to build an entire Chroma out of carbon fiber, to be fair. That might be down the line, but it depends what cost I can do it for, really. So there's a lot of ideas. I'm also primarily at the moment focusing a lot on accessories. So people who have their Chromas from the campaign. One thing I've always said I'm not going to do is I'm not going to forget them then and go, right, well, you've got your camera done now. I've built the camera to be able to take all future accessories. So backs I've designed, pop-up ground glass cover, which I've got, which will integrate with existing cameras and things like that. So I've got a lot of ideas. I'm definitely trying to build a kind of an ecosystem around Chroma. I'm not just building kind of, well, that's the Mark 1. That's gone now. You can never change that or modify that. That's the plan.
Did you spend a lot of time on the ground glass and that often? I mean, I've talked to other builders and people who dabble, and that seems to be often a bit of a sticking point, finding something that works really well.
Yeah, I mean, the ground glass, definitely.
Does that have a Fresnel in there as well, does it?
It doesn't, but again, that's something I'm looking at adding as an optional extra, if you like. The ground glass holder can be separated and the glass replaced or a Fresnel put in. So the ground glass in the Chroma now are plain glass. So they were made by a guy I've worked with before on some other cameras that I've built. So he supplied all of those. So there are brighter ground glass about. I'm not denying that. This was this is the sort of Mark 1. And I definitely like to put a Fresnel on it too. And a few people have asked about engraving grid lines as well. So that's something I could add with the laser as well.
I like grid lines, I have to say. And I suppose if you're thinking of getting different types of backs, you could have the grid lines for 6.7, 6.9.
Yeah, definitely. Funnily enough, I actually cut one yesterday, which is you mentioned before about the ground glass cover, the acrylic cover. I've cut a replacement for that in clear acrylic with 6.12, 6.9, 6.7, 6.6 lines engraved on it.
Yeah.
So the idea being that you could actually have that as the ground glass cover, and you put it on over the glass, and it gives you your frame lines. So it can stay in place, basically. And I need to test it out and sort of look at any impact on brightness and things.
Yeah,
it shouldn't make a massive difference, but certainly something to kind of integrate with the cover, if you like. So that's something I could do as well. So that, again, this comes back to that idea of supporting the people who've already supported me and have their kind of Mark 1 chrome, if you like. That I'm not going, okay, well, in the future, all the ground glass are going to be engraved. I'm going to have this and that. I'm looking, okay, well, you can have this instead, which will give you grid lines over your current ground glass. So that's something that I'm quite keen to integrate sort of going forward, and we'll see.
For anyone who I just discovered it, I was looking on Steve's website earlier, and there's a PDF that you can download. I think it's called Welcome to the Chroma Family.
Yep.
And it's an extremely comprehensive, I don't know how many pages it is, but
24
page PDF document, which is really interesting. It's really lovely, clear photographs with arrows and numbers and written in very clear language. And if you want to visualize or want to see what we've been talking about, go to a Chroma Camera website and look for this PDF. And it's if you go to chroma.camera/user guide, you can download it there. And it was something, again, that was something I should have had when the first campaign camera shipped. To be fair, that was on there. I was late getting that put together, but that was why it's now a downloadable link so everyone can go and get it. And it, like you said, it goes into detail on what all the movements are, how to set up your camera in the first place, and also how to fold it down. All the basics. So, thanks. I'm glad you looked at that. Glad it was a useful document. So obviously we'll come on to wet plate backs, but what other things have you got in the pipeline? If you can share things, ideas for accessories.
Yeah, I've got a 3D printed 6x12 back, which I am currently testing. Roll film back. Sort of two versions.
You just sort of say that quickly, but that's really awesome, isn't it? Because the only source of these things really is eBay, and there's all sorts of variations and different price points. There's hardly anything made new apart from that Chinese Dayu thing.
That's it, isn't it? That's what I want to try and help. Really,
which is a nice bit of kit, but it's chunky and heavy. And it works really well. But
Steve has shared pictures of the prototypes of that with me, and it looks pretty cool. It's pretty slick.
And 612 is such a lovely, in many ways a perfect sort of wide-ish format for me in 120 size. I can stick it in my medium, in my large format, in larger, and still make prints.
Well, that's it. I mean, certainly from a probably a selfish point of view, 612 is the biggest panoramic format you're going to really do on most large format cameras without, like you were talking earlier about your day back, without adding a spaced back, if you like. So I've got kind of two versions. One of them is a completely replaced, is a new back, if you like. So you'd focus on the the existing ground glass, then it's magnetic. So you just remove that and then drop the 612 back on.
Yeah.
The other one is a Graphlock compatible version as well. So it's basically just different mounting back that it's on. So that's something that's definitely going to sort of come down the line.
When do you think that might be?
Well, I'd like to have something when I'm looking retail, so end of September, maybe October time.
When do you hope to start retail? When are you going to get your Kickstarters all out, and when do you start selling or taking orders for?
I'd say my intention of taking orders is going to be probably end of September.
Okay.
So I want all the Kickstarters out before then.
Yeah.
Because I've kind of made a promise to the people who back me and to myself that I'm not doing any retail until the Kickstarters are fulfilled. It's
don't get me started on that anyway.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. I wouldn't like it. It's not something I'm going to do. So that's that. I've also, like Jason said, I've kind of 80% through building a 6x12 SLR. So it's basically a 6x12 roll film camera. This isn't to go on a chroma. This is a camera itself.
Oh, this is something completely different.
Yeah.
Oh,
This is me on my next busy mind.
Wow.
This is going the other way. So this is a 612 with a flip up mirror and waist level finder.
Wow.
With focusing helicoids on it as well. So that's something that I've had it on screen, if you like, for probably about 6 months, but I haven't had the time to actually print one and test it out properly. So I've got a body printed now and probably 90% of the components in it. I'm just at the stage of putting it together and actually seeing if it does what it's meant to do. So, because I love 6x12 and I like medium format, but I'm not very good at hyperfocal focusing or kind of focus by eye and point it in the right direction. So I wanted something that can actually focus on a ground glass.
Wow.
So that's a manual mirror. So you flip the mirror down to focus, and then when you're ready, you flip the mirror up, and it uses large format lenses and shutters. So you then expose your shot on the roll film. Then that's the plan. So there's no dark slide or anything. The mirror is the dark slide then. So that's something that's been in the back of my mind for quite a while. So that down the line will probably be something I'd like to look at. I've got to then look at obviously how to manufacture that. 3D printing isn't really but at the scale I'm at, isn't a viable thing for something that's larger scale. But,
what about is manufacturing your own sheet film holders viable, possible? Because new ones are.
Yeah,
Toyo are still making them, and they're pretty expensive, brand new. But you can still get them. I buy second-hand Toyo ones. I like the Toyo ones, and you can pick up some now and again some bargains from Japan.
Yeah.
But
this might be a good point where Jason comes in as well for sheet film holders.
Is Toyo still making them?
I believe so. Intrepid are selling new ones. I think Mike Walker from Walker Camera sells new ones. So unless they've only just stopped, they certainly have been up until recently.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Obviously, what we're probably going to talk about next is the plate holder.
Yeah.
That myself and Jason are making now. That we did an update recently on the campaign.
Yeah, I saw that. So you're going to be able to use that as
Yeah. So we're basically going to supply adapter plates to put sheet film in that plate holder, as well as sort of reducing adapters inside, so you can shoot 5/7 plates in 8x10 camera.
So that'll be a proper universal sheet film or film holder, really, won't it? Is that?
Yeah. The thought behind that, and I'll just jump in. The thought behind that was that after people need to take a break from shooting dry plates, then they wouldn't have a useless piece of equipment laying around. They could use it with the film adapter and slip a sheet of film in and use it just like they would any other.
Yeah, so that's the plan. Obviously, myself and Jason have been talking as well about actual dedicated sheet film holders. So the molding that the molding company we're working with for making these plate holders, the designs that we've got could then be adjusted to make sheet film as well down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I've not held one of your new dry plate holders in my hands, but I would imagine it's not a million miles, in terms of capability to turn it into a sheet film holder.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember what the thickness is now for the plate. Is it 19 mil, Jason?
No, I think we got it down to like 17 or 18, somewhere in there. And it's only a few millimeters thicker than regular sheet film holders. So we've talked about. So one of the things that injection mold manufacturers can do is they can add inserts to the mold to modify the parts. And so we're kind of looking at that. And really the only trick is that they sort of need to know ahead of time that we want to do that. So we're trying to finalize the design, as the campaign is going, so that they could accommodate that in the future. That way we wouldn't have to, but it's an opportunity to not have to get a new set of molds made for sheet film holders down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's all really exciting. Simon, before we move properly on to talk about the new venture and dark slide, wet dry plate. That's it. That's the word I'm thinking of. Have you got anything else to specifically to ask Steve about his Chroma Camera or other developments?
Not specifically. Although I was about to try and bring Jason into this, because as we've been talking, Jason has joined our Facebook group. And he's already causing trouble.
Did he answer the question?
No, that hasn't happened yet. But he's asking questions such as, are there any large format telephoto lenses that are f1.4 or faster for 4x5?
That's real important.
So I think we definitely need to occupy Jason and talk to him, because he's going to run amok in there. And I'm just thinking, it's a little bit of an odd way of doing the interview today, because I think what we'll do, we'll talk about the collaboration first before we actually ask Jason to tell us a little bit about himself, because I think it'd be good just to do that whilst we've still got Steve with us, because I don't think we've got Steve for much longer. One interesting point of difference between how the Chroma Camera is produced and how the new dry plate holder is produced is that the Chroma Camera is laser cut with acrylics, where the dry plate holder is injection molded, and there's some significant pros and cons between both methods there. And I'm just wondering if we can actually just perhaps start with Steve, possibly, just to go through the design process as to why you've chosen to go down the injection molded process instead of using the method that you've used to produce your camera.
Yeah, sure. The main difference really is volume. The laser cut acrylic, I have built like the cameras, have built quite a lot of versions of holders that have laser cut. Jason's got a wet plate holder of mine that's laser cut as well. And they work fine. The issue really is the assembly required. It's a little bit more involved assembling. You basically bond in laminated piece of acrylic, like the cameras, but for the campaign, we've basically working on having 1,000 of each holder made. That's where our costings come from. So our plan is we're looking at doing the Kickstarter campaign, which funds the molds and manufacturing and assembling those holders, but then looking obviously retail post-campaign. So we needed a bigger volume of holders. And realistically, the laser cut assembly process doesn't really fit in with making 3,000 holders. Hence the injection molding part is it's probably easier for a third party to assemble.
It makes more sense for these common sizes 4x5, 5x7, 8x10 to have them injection molded, and then for the for the less common sizes like whole plate, half plate, stuff like that, which people buy in those sizes, to make those out of like the laser cut plastic, because we don't have to have a big inventory of the other sizes. And we can just sort of manufacture those on the fly. So pulling in the sort of just-in-time manufacturing principles, there's a lot of advantages to that if you don't have as large a demand.
So from a commercial perspective, producing going down the injection molded route, compared to the laminated routes, there's the way that the costs work out flip around, don't they? Because it's relatively an easy entry into being able to actually produce them via laminating them. Whereas your setup costs and your tooling costs for injection molding are far higher, but your product, when it is basically spurted out for a fraction of the cost, isn't it? Is that right?
Exactly. The mold costing up front is where the injection molding cost comes in, really, and there's no kind of cheap way around that. We've got 3 holder sizes. Each holder's got 6 molded parts. 3 individual parts, 2 of each of them. And for each holder, we're looking at about £10,000 for a mold for each one. So, again, a little bit like Jason's plates and my cameras, the idea is to make these affordable, that we, photographers like ourselves, can go, do you know what, I quite fancy trying dry plate. Oh, I'm not going to spend £300 on the holder, but if it's £50, that makes more sense. You think, well, I can justify that in gas, that's okay. And the only way to do that from a cost is injection molding, really. So it's a little bit chicken and egg. You've got to get the money up front, but it keeps the cost down long term then.
Right. Well, Steve, I know that in our little backroom chat you've got to disappear.
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's been great to have you on the show, and like almost all, well, not almost all our guests, we always say, well, we're gonna have to get you to come back another day. So
definitely, love to.
It's a bit of a pressure actually, because we've not had a guest yet who we wouldn't want to get on again. So, who's going to be the
first? Could be worse. Could be someone you don't want to get on. Right. So I'll leave you in Jason's hands to talk about his plates and the holders. Good.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah,
thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah.
Speak again soon.
See you, Steve.
Bye.
See you, mate. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
So Jason,
yes,
a thought occurred to me now that you've gone through Kickstarter, and perhaps in a moment it'd be worth just explaining how the Kickstarter process works and the fact that it's still live at the moment and so on.
Sure.
But you, as you've already, as Steve has already said there, the setup costs for this are going to be considerable, and what the product that you're actually selling is in large format is a pretty small niche within photography in itself, and dry plate is a niche within that niche. So I'm just wondering how you went through the process of deciding that this is something that we think there's enough demand out there to make this happen and be a success.
Well, let me talk about how the campaign works, and then I can get into that, because there's really good reasons for doing this. So the Kickstarter campaign is a crowdfunding sort of campaign. So instead of Steve and I started talking about doing holders, and once we figured out that the demand might be great enough that we wouldn't be able to keep up with assembling them all by hand, and started looking at the injection molding, then we had to find a way to pay for the upfront costs of a mold. And let's be real. So Steve and I, we don't have a lot of money between us, so we're just as rich or poor as any other large format photography shooter. So Kickstarter seemed to be the way to go. Steve had success with his Chroma Camera, so it just seemed like a natural sort of option. So the campaign, the way it goes is that we have a presentation website, and I'll share that with you guys so you can share the link with the listeners. And we have a video and a write-up, and then we have options for people interested in the holders to pledge some money to support the campaign. And in exchange, if the campaign is successful, then they'll get a reward. And there's several options for rewards, including the different sizes, 4x5, 5x7, 8x10, and different combinations and numbers of that, as well as a print reward if you just want to support the campaign and but don't necessarily need a holder. So the way it goes, we launched it back on August 8th, I believe, and it will run till September 8th. And we're trying to raise $32,500 to cover the mold costs and shipping and packaging and all that good stuff. And if the campaign is successful, which means we reach our funding goal, then after the campaign, we'll get all the money coming in, and then we can go off and get them made. If it's not successful, and I'm cautiously optimistic that it will be, but if it isn't, then the backers they don't get charged any money or anything like that. So it's an all or nothing sort of campaign. And the cool thing about the Kickstarter is two reasons. One is that we don't have to go into like a bank or, heaven forbid, go on Shark Tank to try to raise the funds and commit convince a couple of folks to fund this sort of niche of a niche product. The people who would use the holders the most are the ones who can support the campaign and get the benefit out of it. So I think it's easier for a larger group of people to commit less funds, and B, it's sort of a proof in the pudding. So if there's something to shooting dry plates and alternative processes, then it will be successful. And I think I kind of tell people that support the campaign if you're interested, and let's send a strong message that analog photography and film photography is growing and becoming more popular. And so this is a successful campaign would sort of underscore that, I think, for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come on to find out a little bit more about yourself and dry plates soon. But I think we'll carry on just talking a little bit more about the Kickstarter and the actual product itself. And at this moment, if you wanted to use dry plates, without this being available, your options are extremely limited, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. So and the whole reason this started is because when I started selling dry plates, and we'll talk about this more, of course, the most common question that I'm asked, and I get this asked weekly, even now, is where can I find holders for your dry plates? I want to try them out, but do they fit in film holders? And the answer to that is no, because the film holders do not accommodate the thickness of the glass. And so in the past, I've told people, well, you need to go check eBay or antique stores, or you can make your own, or you can adopt a wet plate holder. But like I say in the campaign, I don't think those are ideal options. Personally, when I started shooting dry plate on my own, I bought some antique holders, and I would say that in the past 3 years, I think about 75% of those I can no longer use just from wear and tear and attrition. And those are 120-year-old holders, and they're just getting older. And once they're gone, right? Nobody's making new ones. So
I was going to say,
no one's. Let me rephrase. Nobody's making new low cost ones. There's a handful of companies that are making really nice handcrafted ones, but if you're like me and you don't have a lot of spare funds, I guess you could say, those aren't good options. That's why I scoured eBay myself when I first started, and got a handful of the old wooden ones.
And I think this is where I admire what you're doing, and I think it's exciting anyway to actually have sensibly priced or lower entry price level products being produced brand new. Is just great in this analog world, because there is a resurgence in. I mean, we're not actually even talking film now. We're predating film with these. But we're talking about an analog process, an old analog process, and just like anything that's to do with film and analog photography and so on. I think it's always going to be exciting when people are bringing new. Well, I think we can call it mass-produced products to the market, because that just shows that the resurgence and strength of where film is going, and as we're talking at the moment, I think you're at 80%.
Goal
now.
I haven't been keeping track. We're either at 79.68% or 79.72%. I'm not quite sure.
You're at 80%. But folks, we're just people don't get confused about timelines. We're recording this show probably just about a week before it airs. So who knows? By the time this show is aired, you could be there. I don't want to put the curse on it, but
well, it could be in fact that he didn't need to come on the show.
Yeah.
I could have been sleeping. No,
to pick up on what you were saying, Simon. I mean, and the love for this sort of analog photography stuff on Kickstarter. I mean, I'm a bit of I think there's one person worse than me, and that's Ian Fleming. If folks know Ian. Ian backs just about anything that's got the word film in it, and I'm not far behind him. And I'm staring at a box that I haven't really opened yet, which says lab box on the outside, and it's got 120 and 35, and it looks lovely, but goodness knows why I backed it, because I've got no real use for it, and I'll probably give it to somebody. But it's just I was just really, really impressed that somebody took what was in fact an old design for a daylight loading, developing tank. Effectively, there was one made years ago, and you can still get one, but it kind of leaks and stuff. And they've taken forever getting the design right, tweaking, and this, Jason, this your dry plate holder is nowhere near the complexity of this lab box with all the iterations they've been through.
No,
so hopefully you won't be, you're going to be, once you've got the money and you've got the funding for the mold, you'll be pretty much good to go, I guess.
Well, yeah. So even then, it's not, in the grand scheme of things, based on compared to other stuff I've worked on during my career, it's not that complex. But even so, Steve and I have been working on this for it was actually back in September 2018 that Emmett of emulsive.org put us together, and we started working on this. So we've put a good year into this, designing and then getting prototypes and testing those and rolling it back in the test results into the design. A couple things that helps us. One is I really wanted to keep this as close to the there's an ANSI standard for the dimensions for sheet film holders out there, and I want to keep this as close to that standards as I could, so that they would be compatible with pretty much any camera out there that can shoot sheet film. So getting that correct and all that stuff, because and then also accommodating the thickness of the glass was a little tricky, and there's just a lot of details. I mean, it turned, just looking back, it's turned into a really good little engineering project, to be honest, which I love doing, obviously. So we spent a year working on this, and we've pushed the design about as far as we can go without actually taking it to production. So we put off the Kickstarter as long as we could, because what I wanted to also do is, as soon as the Kickstarter is over, and I'm crossing my fingers that this still holds true, is we can go to the mold manufacturer and turn them on and get these cranked out and out to people as soon as possible. But yeah, so the campaign, a successful campaign, will make that happen.
On your website, Jason, Pictoriographica,
Very good.
You have a you have a blog which is I've dipped in and out of recently, and we'll perhaps come on some of the stuff in there in a little while. But there's quite an interesting picture just pretty near the top, which shows on the left a sheet film holder, and then I think it goes from left to right in order of kind of thickness. Then there's a wooden antique holder, which appears to be slightly thicker than the sheet film holder. Then you've got ChromaGraphica, which again appears a bit thicker than the antique holder, which is, I wondered why that would be. And then you've got the Graphmatic holder, which is a Graphmatic is a multi sheet film holder, isn't it?
Right.
But all of those presumably will fit snugly behind your ground glass in the sort of traditional manner. But perhaps you can comment on those different thicknesses. And you made a comment earlier, just sort of supplementary, about adapting a wet plate holder, and what's really the difference then between wet plates and dry plate holders.
Yeah, so let me talk about the thicknesses. So the sheet film holder that you're looking at on the left, I think is a Graflex holder. It's just it actually has some film in there that I need to develop. But I think that's like 13 millimeters thick, so half an inch thick. The antique holder is about 15, and I think our ChromaGraphica is 16 or 17, and then the Graphmatic is like 20 or something like that. It's pretty thick. The reason that our holder is a little bit thicker is it's primarily due to the differences in manufacturing between like the old wooden antique holders and the injection mold. So you have to sort of beef up the thickness of the plastic walls, and so that when it comes out of the mold, it's not warped or anything like that. So it's just sort of a par for the course for manufacturing. So obviously you have some experience with injection molded parts that we're leveraging for this. One of the things, so I don't show it and I don't have any pictures of it, but earlier iterations of the holder, we sort of started off at the same thickness as the Graphmatic, and when I got the prototype tested out, it worked great and all that good stuff, but I challenged ourselves to make it thinner, because I know that folks who are new to dry plate, or even people who have used antique holders, would be more comfortable using something that's familiar. So like I think I mentioned this on the campaign page. Familiarity of design is important. I want, when people switch back and forth between shooting sheet film and shooting dry plates, it should be sort of a natural transition, because I don't want. I'm sure you've had a conversation with people before about getting the equipment out of the way of the photography process. So I didn't want people bungling with unfamiliar equipment, and that includes things like, pushing the thickness of the holders down as much as possible, just so it's easy to use and familiar to use. So if you look at the holder, not just the thickness, but how you load the plates and how it operates and all that good stuff, it's going to be very, very familiar for somebody who shoots sheet film. So
do you so for use of sheet film, you pull the dark slide out and pull the little hinge bit down and slide the film under the little slots. Is that similar to how you load these with the glass?
Yeah, that's exactly how we have them loaded up. Now with the plates, it's a little trickier to pull it out, because obviously you can't get your fingernail underneath it and sort of pull the sheet up and stuff, because it's glass and it won't bend like that. So what we did to solve that was, and we didn't want it sitting in there loose either, so that you could just slide it out, because then your focus would be off. Imagine it flopping around as you load it into your camera. So what we came up with was this new feature called I call it a loaded plate indicator, or thingy. for short, which is a technical
LPI. We'll call it LPI.
An LPI. So that does two things. One, it tells you if you have a plate loaded, because as you insert the plate, it sort of pushes that up, and so you can quickly tell that.
And then you push it down to push the plate.
Then you push it, yeah, exactly. And because I can't tell you how many times I've grabbed a sheet film holder or a plate holder and go, what the hell is in there? I have no idea if something's loaded in there or not.
Yeah, Simon normally does that.
Yeah. So I think people will appreciate that sort of touch that comes from actual practical experience. So that's kind of cool, and hopefully it'll be spring loaded. So when you remove the plate holder, it'll sort of be retained down, so you can tell that it's empty as well.
That's brilliant.
So that, but from a functionality perspective, that's what you that's what you push the plate out. So you don't have to touch the surface of the emulsion as much. And just from my using the prototype, I'm like, I like this. This is nice. I don't have to go down into this dark room and see if there's something loaded.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so Simon, have we covered a lot of the sort of product type questions?
I think we have. Just one more thing to put in there, but I may have missed it. But estimate on your Kickstarter, it's saying you've got an estimated delivery of February 2020.
Right.
So you're still feeling confident of that one, because Kickstarter's got this nasty habit of going on, and that's not because people just are over optimistic. It's just that sometimes things tend to go
events
wrong.
Dear boy, events.
Yeah,
right.
Things go wrong. I mean, we can talk to say the Hamish Gill's Pixelator being an example there, and right. The reason for his product going on for much longer than expected was that he realised there was a much better way to do it, but the problem was doing it in a much better way and coping with the massively increased demand that he had was to go from a laser cut to doing it the way that you guys are doing it. So
right.
So it's good that you guys have gone there straight away, in many respects. But those when you change things on the fly, it adds time, doesn't it? And so
it does. And so I think a couple of things we have going for us. One is just my experience with engineering projects. Like at work, a decent sized, small team engineering project would go about 9 to 10 months. And roughly half of that is the design work, the upfront design work in getting them to a prototype. And then the rest of that is ordering long lead items and making sure that they're good, and then assembling the initial production examples, and then signing off to go into production. And that part of it, which is basically what's going to be happening after the campaign, is about 5 months long. So I'm counting on my fingers. Let's see, it's October, November, December, January, February. That's about 5 months. So it's a reasonable timeline, I think. And I've got that listed on the campaign page, just from my, engineering experience. And the other thing that we have going for us is that I'm very sensitive to that from my work background of seeing what happens when all of a sudden you change the design and go in a totally different direction. It totally screws up the schedule. So we did all that ahead of time over the past year and got it to the point where, like I said, I'm hopeful that we can just pull the trigger on getting the mold manufacturer started. We are going through the exercise right now during the campaign of cleaning up the models. I actually have another colleague here locally who's a mechanical engineer, and is really good with all this good stuff, who's going through the model and helping us clean that up. And and generate the limited dimensional drawings, the blueprints, if you will, sort of that injection molding houses expect to see. So that work's all going on in the background. And let's see, the campaign ends in September. Kickstarter says it's a couple 3 weeks to get all the funds together. So I'm pretty confident that we'll have something together ready to go.
I think you pulled a blinder, really, because if you'd have had if you just launched this early and you had a deadline, you were kind of indicating November for shipping, and then there was a delay, you would end up on the Sunny 16 end of year podcast where they review all the Kickstarters and throw them all under the bus for Graham does. So you've got a long way to go before you get into the film Ferrania area. I back that. That was like 30 years ago.
Yeah. I mean,
Labbox kept changing their design, and I was positive all the way through because the company was pre-existing and they had they sell other stuff, and there was people, but you should have seen the hate that was on the Kickstarter chats. There was like, this is a scam and all this sort of stuff. I said, guys, it's not. You can criticize that all these design changes on the fly, maybe, but it's going to end up with a great product. You could argue that all of that should have been done before, maybe, I don't know. But clearly they've ended up with something that works really well. It just took them forever.
Early on in my career, a Kaji old school engineer who had been working for decades for the Navy, he was one of my mentors early on. He had a saying that at some point in every program you have to shoot the engineer and begin production.
Yeah.
So
otherwise you never get into production.
Yeah, exactly. So once, like I said, we're finalizing the design because we have a little bit of time before the campaign ends, and we have a date at the end of September, or at the end of August. I'm sorry, August 30th or September 1st, something like that. That we're going to do what engineers call a critical design review. And we'll review the design, the drawings, and we'll say, okay, this is it. This is our configuration that we're going to go to production with. And just, even if we want to change it, we'll be like, nope, we're going to do it. And there's a little bit of risk there from a design standpoint that, we'll put out a prototype. We'll have the injection molding house print out a prototype that we'll test to verify that the design is good. So anything that might need to be changed that we didn't miss, I mean, that's on us to make sure that we got all our bases covered, which I'm pretty confident we have the experience to do that. But any minor tweaks or anything like that, they have to be done to, before the mold is cut, because once you cut the mold, then there's no going back. So it's just upfront and rigor, and that's, to be honest, that's not really anything new or special. That I do that every day at work anyhow. Well, not every day, but I don't have that many projects.
Communication with the backers, this, it's the key thing. And people forgive you all sorts of sins if you just tell them. The worst thing is, I've been having a rant on Twitter about something else, and just no communication at all. And yet, there's things being sold in shops already, and backers haven't been fulfilled. Okay, then there's probably really good reasons for that, but tell people,
Yeah. Some folks might remember, and I hate bringing this up because I have nothing to do with them, but I don't know if you guys remember Galaxy tried to put out plate holders back in 2016. And
the same people who did the direct positive paper.
They had a campaign for dry plates way back then, and it basically took everybody's money and ran. And I don't know if that was something that something happened to the team.
And then did they resurface as ChromaGraphica?
No. In fact, when I started making dry plates, I had people ask, "Are you familiar with Galaxy?" I was like,
"Nope."
No, what the hell is that? So I went and looked it up, and I was like,
oh dear.
Those guys didn't look like they knew what they were doing. So I think part of that, Sorry, go ahead.
Now, I was just going to say, I think this is a good time to put to end this section of the show, which is, I think, I would probably describe it as arse about face, and for our American listeners, that's ass backwards. We've not actually introduced you, Jason, and given people a chance to understand a bit about yourself and your background.
I'm a nobody.
And I think this is a good time to do it. And I'll just, I mean, you don't need a huge amount of introduction now because we've been talking for half an hour. But I just want to say I've spoken to you before, Jason, on the Classic Lenses podcast back in episode 64, which was earlier on this year, and which is also actually the last episode that we did with the late Carl Havens.
Right.
But that was a fantastic show. We really enjoyed making that one, and that was actually. We used part of your expertise in that, which we've not even touched upon at all today.
Yeah.
And that's what you do as a day job and things like that. So I won't say any more, but I think it'd be a good idea if you, for those people who have not listened to that show, if you could, give yourself let our listeners know a little bit more about yourself and why you're actually very qualified to be in the position to book for this Kickstarter.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jason Lane. So my day job. Let me start there. So I'm a lens designer by trade, and I've designed optics in my industry for almost 2 decades now. I had a little bit of a break from it last year when the company I was working for tried to make me a chief engineer or system architect, and I hated. Well, won't say I hate it, but I was like, I miss designing optics, and it's actually kind of your fault, Simon, because talking about lenses for 2 hours, designing optics for 2 hours made me realize how much I missed it. So I transferred back to the optics group. So I'm designing optics again, but I've done that for almost 20 years, and I've got not for the consumer photography market, but I've got lenses fielded anywhere from deep in the ocean, and I have a lens that's going up on the space station this coming year, and kind of everything in between. So that's my day job. And then for Pictoriographica, that's a side business that kind of sprung out of my photography hobby. I actually came into the hobby via my interest in optics, because long ago, at the start of my career, I moved out to the desert southwest of the United States, and out there, it's amateur astronomy is a really good hobby to be in, because there's not a lot of light pollution where I live and all that good stuff. So I sort of got into that, looking at the stars, and got into astrophotography, which is taking a camera and strapping it onto the back of the telescope and shooting, taking pictures of nebula and galaxies and stuff like that. And when I got into that, this was pre-digital revolution. And so I bought a Olympus OM1, which I still have, and would sit out there like a bump on the log, steering, making guidance corrections for the telescope, and take 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour long exposures. And it sounds as boring as it actually is, or it's actually as boring as it sounds, right? So you sit there and look at an eyepiece and adjust the controls while keeping a star centered on a reticle for 3 hours.
What, you were doing that manually?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. The telescope. So the telescope mount was it was a computerized mount, so you tell it to go look at Orion's nebula, and it'd point to it, and then it had a motor that would keep it going. But motors, like any other real part, there's little differences in how the individual teeth are machined as the gear rotates. So it would speed up a little bit and slow down. So you have to correct that. Nowadays, you use a digital camera that's fed back into the mount. At the time, it was my eyeball feeding back into my hands, adjusting the control. So it was all manual, and it's actually when I would do that in the middle of winter, it was actually kind of the coldest would have been in a long time, because I can't get up and move around. I have to make corrections. So I did that for a while, and I actually have made some really nice photos with it. It started a family, and the kids came along, so I had to sort of drop the astro part of that hobby, because sleep becomes precious when you have newborns, right? And sort of stuck with photography, and specifically shooting film, because at that time, for my day job, in that time frame, the digital revolution was going on, and all these new high resolution, for the time, imaging arrays were coming out, and my boss said, "Hey, go characterize all those, see if we can use them for work." And so I did that, and pretty much got sick of digital imaging real quick, doing it day in and day out at work. And the last thing I wanted to do was come home and sit at a computer and do Photoshop. So I stuck shooting film throughout the 2000s, and after we moved out to New Hampshire back in 2011, I still did that. And then at some point, I got interested in dry plate. Maybe that was like maybe 3 years ago now. Had the noted looking at the recipes that you have to control temperature and the rates at which you add the chemicals together. And I was like, that's like perfect for an engineer. So
Jason, just stop you there if I might just jump in a little bit. What got you interested in, going back to some old historical process? We had Joseph Brunges on last show, and he's pouring, his plates on. I mean, his emulsion onto the plate. Your dry plates were a little bit later, weren't they, in the sort of evolution of things? But either way, it's still going back in time. And what drew you to that process? Did somebody inspire you? Did you stumble across someone's work, or how did you get into it?
Thanks for interrupting me from rambling. I appreciate that. If I start rambling, just tell me to shut up.
No, you weren't. It was just I'd have forgotten to ask the question later.
Yeah. Okay. So, what got me into dry plate? Well, I was shooting film, and I guess, to be honest, I think I came across a recipe or saw a post about it. A handful of people were doing it. I was like, well, that looks intriguing, and sort of in the back of my mind, I was churning over the little technical challenges. If any of your listeners are familiar at all with astrophotography, not only do you have a really nice, beautiful, creative result, but there's a lot of technical challenges to doing astrophotography. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and if you screw up one of them, then you're going to have a bad output. But if you get it all right, it can be glorious. And I think that's what appeals to me. Just I don't self-reflect a lot, but when I do, one of the times I was wondering what I like in a hobby, and I think I like the mix of a creative outlet, but also sort of the tinkerer or technical challenge of a hobby, which appeals to the engineer in me. And doing dry plate sort of fits into there, because and I'll talk about the history here in a minute, but there's a lot of little technical details and techniques that you have to get right to get a good dry plate, and I think that appeals to me. Aside from just the beautiful characteristics that are really kind of unique.
The internet has a way of sending you down particular rabbit holes, but as you started plunging headlong down that particular rabbit hole, I bet you didn't think that you'd end up quite where you are today.
No, absolutely not. So I and I'm going to give a lot of credit to people like Denise Ross and Ron Mowry, Mark Osterman, and Nick Brandreth, who are some of the other kind of big names in dry plates, at least here in the States. It was definitely a rabbit hole. So I sort of, at some point, I said, well, I got a little bit of free or spare hobby money, so I'll buy some of these chemicals. I had the stuff I needed to control temperature because I just started developing E6 and C41, and I sort of geeked out and got a well, I wouldn't say nice. It was cheap Chinese temperature controller and some of the stuff that I hacked together to make a water bath to control temperature in my chemicals. So I had the stuff to do that, which is sort of critical to the process of making emulsion. And from there, I was just buying the chemicals and trying it out. And my first plates, they came out, well, let's be honest, they look like shit. And so it took a little while to get the techniques to make a good plate. But once I did, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And this is even more of a challenge than film. So it sort of rekindled my interest, which had been lagging a little bit shooting photography. I bought a cheap kind of a beater camera, which was a camera that dates from like the 1890s. It was all beat up and stuff, but the bellows were light tight and the shutter still worked, and sort of just went to town. And I did that for a couple of years. And Christmas, December 2017, I was sort of getting busy with work and starting to pull some long hours. And I had about 3 boxes of dry plates, 4x5 plates sitting in my fridge. And I was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to get to these. So I might as well, see if anybody else wants them. So I put an ad up on Photrio, which is old APUD, for these 3 boxes of dry plates, and went to bed. And when I woke up in the morning, I had a full inbox. People saying, I'll take them. And then others saying, I think I missed it. Can you make some more? Can you make them in these size? And I was like, yeah, sure. Why the hell not? Christmas vacation is coming up, so I have some free time. And I ended up making plates all during vacation and getting maybe two hours of sleep a night. And sort of founded Pictoriographica there almost sort of spontaneously. And it's just taken off from there. I'm not a marketing guy, so word kind of spread, through the forums and then by word of mouth. And all told, last year in 2018, I ended up coding and shipping out at least 10,000 plates.
Wow. And is that you, or you have some help?
That was all me, stupidly. I didn't get a lot of sleep, obviously, because I was doing this. My Pictoriographica workday starts at about 8 p.m. But back in November, it got too much for me to handle. So I actually hired on a couple of high school students who help. One of them, he's actually texting me to see if he can work today, preps glass. And I've had a couple of girls who coat the plates for me, so which is great. So I actually get sleep now.
Does it have to be glass, or because when we were talking to Joseph, he was talking, well, you can use glass, or you can use the blackened for the wet plate, the blackened trophy aluminum.
Yeah. So you can coat it onto the trophy plate, and I know exactly what you're talking about because I've had a couple people ask if I could coat my emulsion onto those to make dry plate tintypes, which is actually a historical sort of hybrid process that you can dig up and find. And there's a special developer formula that you can use to bring the contrast out and tone the silver, the silver grains a lighter color to get the contrast up. And I did that. I was like, yeah, sure. I don't know. I don't see why not. So, but what I found is it's really tricky to get the emulsion to stick to the anodized aluminum of the trophy plates, which, if you're familiar with anodized aluminum, pretty much anything is hard to get to stick to that stuff. I did have somebody send me the tins from, I think, is it Rockland that makes a wet plate kit that they send you?
Don't know. I'm writing it down though, as you say.
I think they sent me the tins for that, and those coated really nicely. So, and I think those turned out really well. Those couple of folks were interested in, like I said, sort of the dry plate tintype hybrid thing. That's something that Nick Brandreth sort of helped me figure out, how to develop them and stuff to get the contrast. And he probably knows more about those than I do. But I guess the long and short of it is, there's been products out there like Liquid Light, and I think a couple of other companies that make ready-to-go emulsion.
There's a few. Graham Vasey, who was our first guest, Simon, was
Yes, he was, episode 2.
Yeah, I don't think we really touched much with him on it. We didn't get into much detail, but he uses liquid emulsion, and I know there's a few Photo Speed, I think, in Europe make it, and Silverprint they used to be in London, they've moved out now. They used to make their own version. It's fairly readily available. You have to heat it up in hot water and then pour.
Yeah,
you can coat that stuff. Sticks to pretty much anything.
That much sticks to anything. Yeah, and more prior to them using it. I've tried Liquid Light, and from my perspective, it's a real pain in the butt to work with. But they're using it. That's great.
How different is so when? What goes into the sort of chemicals for making a glass plate?
So I actually did a presentation for the Photographic Historical Society of New England, and I had a similar question. What chemicals did I put in there? How many put in there? And I actually counted for the two emulsions that I have. So I have an ASA2 emulsion, which is a bromoiodide basic emulsion that would be similar to what you would use in the early 1880s, like 1881 or so. Looks real similar to wet plate. That has probably 10 or 15 chemicals in it, but it's a bromide iodide recipe, and like Liquid Light, I think is a chloride. So it's a silver chloride that Liquid Light is. So the ASA2, it's a bromoiodide. So silver bromide, silver iodide is a basic.
And that's fairly similar to the sort of processes that would have been used 120 years ago or however long.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the recipe that I used, that I started with those, dates from the late 1800s. So
skies are nice and white. No.
This is. So making sure that the look that you would have gotten back then is important. Maintaining that, even as I tweak the emulsion to make it easier for other people to use and stuff. That's like a driving requirement, is to, if you develop a plate and you held it against plates from that era, barring aging issues and stuff, they would look really similar.
Wow.
And in fact, there's a fellow down in Worcester, Mass, who has a huge collection of dry plates, and he came up to see them, and he brought some of his with, and we set them side by side on a light table, and it was hard to tell the difference, other than the fact that my kids were wearing T-shirts, and the kids in those pictures were wearing dresses and stuff like that. The other emulsion is an orthochromatic 25 speed. This is the newest one that I released a few months ago, and that's more of a 1895-ish look. So I'm almost into last century, but it sort of spans the bulk of the dry plate era and represents the advances that were made initially by amateur photographers, and then as George Eastman got into it, people like him, advances in coming from the commercial manufacturers.
On your blog from just last month, I think there's a characteristic curve, density curve, just above a photograph of a lad with a shark on his T-shirt. Is that
that's my portrait test victim number 3? That's my youngest.
Is that shot on that slow? Is it orthochromatic?
So the ASA2 is unsensitized, so it only sees UV and blue.
Oh, okay.
So it's really similar to, like I said. So that's sort of where dry plates started after the folks had figured out how to get the speed up and stuff like that. So early 1880s.
So the speed, so that's UV and blue. So the speed of 2, that's going to change from depending on what time of the day or time of the year.
Absolutely. So it's nominally ASA2,
But that's in America in sunny conditions. What about in England in the winter?
So that's actually New England early spring. So not ideal. So in England, I think I was talking to folks from Germany about this because they're a little farther north. I think I'm actually at the same latitude as Rome. And so for London, in the wintertime, like for me during the wintertime, I probably need to add about a stop or so, and you probably need to add about a stop and a half or two.
I think, to start with, maybe a stop.
Yeah. And actually, it's funny. So you can actually go back on the internet and look at literature from the period and see all their tables and charts for how the speed of dry plates during the dry plate era, the charts that were printed out to give you an indication of how fast or how slow the plates would shoot at different times of the year. So it's exactly the same issues that they had back then. So
it's clearly bugging you because I'm just for the first time now reading. This is
that's real pain in the butt.
Yes, I've been annoyed by and dissatisfied with how your plates lose. This is you writing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, lose so much speed.
If there's any grammar errors, that's somebody else.
So I've been working almost non-stop over the past 2 weeks to refine the remulsion formula so that the plates give denser negatives in winter when metered at ASA2.
Yeah, so that was like in March that I was writing that. And it was all because, so one of the things that I think that was some folks in Germany who were trying to shoot them in the middle of winter. I had a couple things going on. One was that I was losing speed in the formula because I had a chemical going bad. And so I fixed that. But then also when I had originally characterized the speed, it was like early fall or something like that. And I think I mentioned it here in the article maybe, or the blog post. But around February timeframe, I was like, okay, well, I got to fix this because, I got to troubleshoot the formula, and then also since it's early winter and it'd be a good time to sort of recharacterize the speed, and so that I wouldn't get as much of a variation. It'll be faster in the summer, slower in the winter, and I was trying to get somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to interrupt because myself, I think there might be a few people that might be scratching their heads a little bit at the moment, and that's this business about different speeds at different times of the year.
Yeah.
Cool. Could you explain the principle or principles behind that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So inherently, natively, silver halide grains only see UV and blue. And the dyes, the sensitizing dyes that allow the silver halides to see a larger part of the spectrum, and by see I mean they respond to light of different wavelengths, right? So I'll say it sees UV and blue, which means that it responds to wavelengths corresponding to the ultraviolet and the blue part of the color spectrum. Silver halide inherently only sees UV and blue, and depending on which halide salt you combine the silver with, you see more or less than that. So bromoiodide, so silver chloride, only sees really UV, and then silver bromide sees a little farther into the blue, and then when you add a little bit of iodide to that, you kick it into the green just a little bit. But most of the response is in the ultraviolet. So as the ambient ultraviolet outside varies as a function of day, in the mornings and in the late afternoons, the atmosphere absorbs the ultraviolet coming from the sun, so there's not as much of it because basically sunlight's coming through more atmosphere. In wintertime, we get less UV, and you'll hear on the Weather Channel the UV index, and that's when the UV index is high, then these plates will be faster. And that's not just true for my dry plates and old emulsion. That's true for modern film as well. Mm-hmm. And so for modern film to have less, for the speed of modern film to vary less with ultraviolet, they actually, in the emulsion layers, they actually filter out the ultraviolet and tune the color, the sensitizing dyes, so that the response to UV is diminished. That's sort of the two methods that they use. Otherwise, if Kodak and Ilford and stuff didn't do that, then you would see the same variation in speed.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. When I learned that up, I was like, "Oh, that makes me feel better."
Ilford's Harman's direct positive paper also suffers from the same thing as
yeah. And I would think that people who shoot paper negatives sort of have to deal with it, and of course, wet plate folks as well. So it's nothing new. It's just new if you're a film photographer who's trying out dry plate. It's one of those things that you may not have had to deal with. And I found shooting the dry plates, just my own experience, is that I've become more attuned to what's going on with my lighting, my ambient lighting, the what the color content is of the lighting and stuff, because it affects the dry plates. And I think it has helped strengthen my own photography, to be honest.
So just from a range of with in terms of ASA, it's nominally 2 ASA. But what's the span then? What could it go to and from, would you say?
I think it can go just due to the variations in the light levels. I think it could go up to 3 or 4 in the summer if you have a high contrast scene. Down indoors, when you go indoors, you lose at least a couple stops just because of the spectrum of indoor lighting. So I think you could lose, at my latitude, in the wintertime, another stop. I think it'd be good. I think I'd be comfortable shooting at ASA 1 and getting a good plate. For you folks up in London, probably a stop and a half or something like that. There's other things that come into play too. Your speed will be faster if you're using older lenses. Newer lenses sometimes use glass that absorb UV, or if you forget to take your UV filter off, that'll cut your speed down. And then, like I said, you also sort of the latitude of the emulsion itself, which I've spent a lot of time sort of tweaking and stuff. You could push it a couple of stops in either direction and still get a really good plate.
Is that the
push your pull?
Is that the case for? So you produce 2 emulsions, the ASA 2 and then the 25. What's the main difference between? Apart from speed, obviously.
Yeah, the speed.
But the look is different, presumably, is it?
The look is different. They're similar. So the 25 speed is also orthochromatic. So I introduced the first sensitizing dye. So sometime after 1881, a guy named Vogel discovered that if you added different dyes to the emulsion, then you could change its response to color, basically increasing the colors that the emulsion responds to. And so
that's how you end up with a panchromatic film.
Yeah, orthochromatic uses specific dyes that increases the sensitivity out into the yellow, and then panchromatic is
into the red.
Adds different dyes to increase the and infrared and so on and so forth. So I actually, for my orthochromatic 25 emulsion, I use that first dye that they started using for orthochromatic plates. It's called erythrocin, and it's also known as FD&C red number 3, which is a food coloring dye. which it's kind of fun. And if I get spill a drop of the concentrated powder dye, then everything in my lab is like pink for a week to clean it up. It's pretty strong stuff. But so that's the dye that I add to make the orthochromatic plates, and it's what they would have used at the time as well. So I get the increased speed, and I get the orthochromatic response. What I found, I haven't shot the 25 speed as much as I would like, but I'm continuing to use it. And I found that I think the amount of dye that I'm using kind of suppresses the UV response a little bit, so I don't get as much of a variation to lighting.
Mm-hmm.
So when you add a sensitizing dye, as you add higher and higher concentrations, you'll sort of peak out the response across your band of colors that the plates will see. And then as you add more, it starts repressing the inherent sensitivity to the ultraviolet. So I think I've got kind of a sweet spot there.
Well, I'm really kind of childishly excited about this because I've been watching your plates for a long time.
Yeah.
And I've been watching your site for a long time, and I've seen you online and whatnot. And I thought, well, I'd love to get into it, but I think it's probably the holders that were holding me back, so to speak. And so it's really kind of. But for folks out there listening who are just sort of getting their head around large format film, why should they bother? Why should any of us bother with glass plates?
Oh, I don't know. No,
come on, you got to do better than that.
Well, it's with digital cameras out there, why shoot film? So it's for one thing, I think it's another tool in the photographer's toolbox of unique looks. I know photographers these days, one of the reasons that film is seeing a resurgence is that photographers are kind of looking for a different look than the norm, right? Everybody and their mother has an iPhone and can make digital pictures, but not as many shoot film. And so people who shoot film, I think, well, they're either crazy like me, or they're looking for a unique look. And same argument goes for people who shoot wet plate. Why would you shoot wet plate when it's so inconvenient? Well, it's got this cool, unique look to it. And there's, professional studios that have created business making wet plate portraits, and they do well because people are looking for something different. And dry plate is no exception. I think it's got a unique look to it. It's got a unique look to it that sort of combines characteristics of wet plate that preceded it, along with
it's damn so easy to use than wet plate.
Oh heck yeah, and it combines some of the convenience of shooting film, but it also sort of has its own unique look too.
Simon's he doesn't know it yet, but Simon's given me this old camera that's down by my feet here, which has got. Well,
I have been thinking about that.
Possession is like 9/10 of the law, I think. So, so this camera you've given me here, that I haven't actually looked at since I looked at it in your house, Simon, because I've been too scared to play with it. It would be perfect for this process, wouldn't it? I think if I had it, now that I've got this camera, I can. But what's the size of it? Is it 5?
It's half plate.
5.7. A half plate. Yeah. Well, that's okay.
And I think I was wondering if you'd actually examined the film holders in it, because it's currently set up for film, but and we talk about an antique camera here now, a wooden brass camera, although it's painted in battleship grey for reasons unknown. Maybe it's a navy one, I don't know. But the actual film holders.
Yeah, I'm holding it in my hand now.
Yeah, they've got inserts in them, which I think actually makes it the right depth for film. And I'm just wondering if you take those inserts out, whether that would actually fit the glass plates.
Yes, they would. So So back in the days, so let me talk a little bit about the history of the dry plate as it relates to film. So George Eastman, and I hope you guys know who that is, got his start coating dry plates. Actually, he was a lawyer and was going on a trip. I'm sure most people know the story. Was going on a trip, and so he decided to buy a camera and hated shooting wet plate, but then found out about dry plates and sort of got into that, forgot all about the trip, from what I understand, and started coating dry plates and then selling them. And he started sort of like how I did. I think he started coating them in his mother's kitchen. I'm in my wife's basement, and got his start coating dry plates. And when dry plate sort of was so convenient compared to wet plate that it sort of led to the first sort of explosion of popularity of photography amongst the general population. So it led to the first sort of out of amateur photography, because you didn't need to bring your darkroom with you to develop them. While the chemicals are still wet, they're sensitive when the emulsion is dry. And then when in the mid 1880s, late 1880s, I forget my dates, but when the celluloid film came out, George Eastman figured out how to coat that and then started making film. And of course, that was way more convenient. And the rest is history. And dry plates sort of went obsolete. But yeah, so at the time, when he was trying to convert people over to film, because he had the market cornered on that and wanted to grow the business, wanted to grow Kodak, photographers, I mean, they must have been like us. They didn't have a lot of money. So, but they had dry plate holders. And instead of making them buy new dedicated sheet film holders, they started offering sheet film adapters, those inserts. So you could insert those in and then shoot film. And that's pretty much the reason why a sheet of 4x5 film is not exactly 4 inches by 5 inches. It's a little smaller, because back in the day, at the turn of the century, most photographers were shooting dry plate holders with the inserts, and the film had to fit into those inserts.
Well, I never knew that. And so that's your hunch, Simon, is correct. That's what it is. And that's the reasoning behind, so you're going down this route, aren't you, with the Kickstarter product? You're going to be able to adapt that to... Did we talk about that off air, or did we talk about it when Steve was still here? But you are going to adapt the sheet film holders so they can take film as well as...
Yeah, I mean, let's be realistic. Engineers are practical, and while the idea of somebody buying the dry plate holders and shooting them forever is kind of nice. I think a lot of folks would buy them, try out dry plates, and then set it aside or something like that. And I didn't want the holders. I didn't want them to invest their hard-earned dollars in a holder and then only use it for a couple months and set it aside. I wanted to make sure that if they did shift away from dry plates or had to take a break from dry plates, then they could still use the holder. And so we're going to come out with the just cheap little low-cost sheet film adapters that you can slide into the holder and still use them for shooting film.
And I'm really excited about being able to hold a glass plate and show friends
so cool.
and relatives. Presumably, what about storage though? Because I've got in my mind I need like a velvet-lined wooden box with slots in. But with my
you
negatives,
just carry them around in your wallet.
Say again.
So you just carry them around in your wallet. No, let me touch on that. Let me expand on that point you just made about holding the plate.
Yeah.
So the tangibility of the process is one of the things that I really like about it. We talk about holding a sheet of film, and it's a tangible thing as opposed to looking at a digital photo on your screen. This
one step
the
more,
dry plate, it's like it takes that and it just exponentially increases it, because you've got this solid chunk of glass with your negative picture on it, and it's definitely you have to be careful with it, and it's got some weight to it and stuff. So it just takes that tangible aspect that we love about film photography and just takes it a step further, like you said. Yeah. But so as far as storing them, the nice thing about quote unquote reinventing a process is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So there's been methods for archivally storing dry plates out for decades and decades, from museums having to preserve it and stuff. So there's archival boxes and envelopes, and I use those, and I can share a couple of links.
Yeah, there's a great company. If you're in the UK, I use them. I think they supply museums and a lot of other shops. They're called Secol, Secol.
Yeah,
and they're based in Thetford. And if you give them a bit of prior notice, you can go in and collect stuff. So I've been in there and picked up archival clamshell boxes, and sleeves and stuff. But they make all sorts. And if I go on their site, Secol's website, they probably have something, I'd have thought.
Yeah, so those work really well. And of course, you can store them in the boxes that they're shipped in.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Right. So it's similar to film, except of course, dealing with the extra weight.
So when you ship these things out, is each glass plate in a separate paper sleeve or something, or how does that work?
So I've got 3-piece boxes, and when I first started selling these, I ran out of boxes real quick, and I never stressed out about boxes before in my life. And it actually led to Blue Moon Camera being my first retailer, because I asked them for all the boxes that they had, and they kind of asked why, and then the conversation took off from there. So they were my first retailer to start selling these. But anyways, I have 3-piece boxes, light-proof boxes made in the different sizes that I use. So they're a lot like the 3-piece sheet film boxes. You've got an inner box and then an outer lid.
Yeah.
Right. And then for the plates themselves, I interleave them with sheets of archival paper, to protect them, because I don't want the emulsion rubbing against each other. So it's got interleaving paper, which some of the film manufacturers do as well. So it's just sort of practical, nothing fancy. I don't have to do anything special that hasn't been done before. So
I always think that portraits, particularly of frazzled old guys with lots of like red veins in their faces, make great, awesome subjects. Is there what kind of lends itself to? Is it people mainly? Portraits? Do you think lends itself to this process?
Yeah. So. People, so you think about the sort of spectrum and what it brings out when you photograph people with a deep blue filter on it, all that sort of high contrast, the blemishes, and stuff sort of comes out, which older folks, have really good characteristics.
Is that the filter, a blue filter? Use that, and that helps with these sort of ortho plates.
Well, these plates themselves don't need a filter like that to bring that out. So like my redheaded daughter.
But if you shot normal pan film with a blue filter on, that's you're getting close to that sort of effect.
Yeah, I think so. Although there's, modern panchromatic film cuts the UV off quite a bit, and I think that adds to it. Like I said, the dry plate look it resides somewhere in between the look of wet plate and the look of film. It sort of borrows characteristics and then brings in its own. So it really is a little unique. But like if I took a picture of my oldest daughter, who has a lot of freckles, those freckles really stand out.
Yeah, she probably wouldn't thank you, would she? Unless I don't know. Maybe she's fine with her freckles. Kids.
She's gotten really good at faking a smile. I mean, she puts up with it. She's my portrait test victim #1. So
yeah,
they
I think they look great. Kids
they're good sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so that the freckles and stuff comes out. If you take pictures of people on the red side, their skin looks soft and all that good stuff. This is sort of the good for faces with like a lot of wrinkles from smiling or age, stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think.
Take some pictures of you, Simon. You'd look great.
When you were talking about the pictures of with the deep not veins, but visible veins and deep wrinkles and stuff. I was wondering if you were talking about selfies for you there. I'm just thinking we've gone on for quite a bit of time. And there's still a question that an area we need to go to, and there's another area after that. So I think we're going to be heading into one of those things. We're going to need to get you back.
Okay, I'll shut up now.
Well, no, I've definitely got one thing I've got to put to you, but
Yes.
I just want to just say to Monty. I've forgotten the surname now.
This email that you sent in about 10 years ago.
Exactly, yeah. We've mentioned this email from Monty a couple of times about some advice on lenses, and I do want to put this to you, but the next question I'm going to ask is going to take us over the limit. So we do need to get you back, because we know that you know a lot about large format lenses, and it'll be great to have that conversation. So we're going to have to park that one for now. But the question that I have for you, which we've not touched upon it, is so you've taken your photograph, and you've now got to develop it, because
it was next on my list, Simon.
There you go.
I was going to say, is it just HC 110, or can we use something else?
Or whatever. So
you can use so obviously my favorite developer is HC 110. I've used it for years and like it. So I sort of characterize the speed and stuff in HC 110, but you could use anything that you'd use film or paper in. The emulsion likes an active developer, and I think it responds better to a solvent developer. So like you mentioned D76, so you could develop it in stock D76, which is a little bit, provides some solvent action, and I think the result looks really well. I think for stock D76, it's like 7 to 8 minutes, something like that. One of the nice things about the plates is, if you have a favorite developer and you email me and say, this is working that, I'll say, I don't know, try it out. The nice thing is that you can develop these in your darkroom in a tray under the safe light, kind of like how you develop paper. And is that time's up?
There's a referee in the background.
Yeah, it was my app to say that Stoke City have just kicked off against Derby County. I do apologise.
Okay. So you can develop by inspection, which is what photographers did back in the 1800s, and watch the image come up, and you want to develop to where it looks darker than you would like, and then that's your developing time for whatever developer you like. So obviously it's since this is a silver gelatin emulsion, it's a primitive version of modern film. The developers that you would use for wet plate are not, you don't want to use those, because it just cuts down the speed too much. But modern developers,
and do you use, what about the fixer? Is there anything special about the fixer?
There used to be. I used to recommend a hardened fixer, but I've since hardened the emulsion myself. So now you can use a rapid fixer. I use HiPam to fix mine,
which is actually the same. I don't know why they mess around with the names. It's the same as what Ilford referred to as rapid fix now, I think. But HiPam is the same thing.
I was always confused by that too, and I see no difference. No. But that's so for my plates. And before the show, I was just doing this. They can fix. Takes about 4 minutes to fix. So.
You just mentioned that about not using the traditional developers, saying that it slows. Do you say it effectively slows the emulsion down? Is that right?
Well, I mentioned that the developers that wet plate shooters use, you wouldn't want to use these. You wouldn't want to use those, because I know that's. I've had the question before. People who've shot wet plate want to try out the dry plate, and they say, "Can I use the developer I use for wet plate?" And the answer is, technically you could, but it cuts the speed down so much that they're practically unusable. So you want to use developers that you would use for sheet film or paper.
So what were they using back in the day then on the dry plates?
They were mixing their own. So it would be stuff like metol or hydroquinone. They also use pyro quite a bit. I think pyro is sort of the most commonly used.
If you
and
use
then
metal by itself, it's fairly slow working, isn't it? So it's only when they add other things to it that you get a bit of speeding.
Yeah, and I've been looking into this. I'm not the expert on it, but I think hydroquinone is faster, but it's also higher contrast, and so you use those two, you can balance it out.
They call those MQ developers, don't they? And then there's a phenidine hydroquinone, so PQs, MQ. PQs.
Yeah. So back in the day, they're sort of mixing their own. Or of course, you had stuff like, sort of the really early developers like Diafine was coming out and stuff like that. D76 came out at some point. So all that stuff kind of goes back to the dry plate era. All the developers that we know. But yeah, people use Pyro a lot, which I've never used. So that's kind of one of the fun
you're
things
with HC110, aren't you? You've got some tips on your website. There's quite a lot of information on Jason's website, dry plate blog, technicals and tips. Yeah. And there's a few videos out there. I don't know if you've actually put a video out, but I did see some YouTube stuff out there earlier.
Yeah, I'm an engineer. I'm not an actor, so
I saw one by there's a guy there developing some 11x14 plates. It was on YouTube. 11 Planet Randy or something. He's got this big wooden Deerdoff camera on wheels that he wheels out into his backyard, takes a picture of a potted plant and develops it all to nice music, and then he gets a big light leak on it.
Yeah, he was one of my first customers, and he asked for that custom size, and I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that. Mm-hmm. And he really liked them. But
it looks simple enough. He's got his red safe light on, and he's using Kodak HC110 like you suggested.
Right. Now the ASA2 plates, you can use just a regular like a OC safe light for those like you'd use for paper. The Ortho 25 plates, their response dips into I think it actually goes up to like 610 nanometers. So you want to use a red safe light or just minimize the time that you have it.
Yeah.
You have enough time to develop it and see it develop, but you don't want to let it sit out. Just sort of same sort of practices you use for photographic paper.
Yeah.
And finally onto printing, because this is where dry plates have got a natural advantage over the wet plate work.
Yeah.
That's assuming I've actually been listening to the last two podcasts properly. So you can actually mount these in an enlarger somehow.
Yes.
And print normal. Would that be just a normal print on using normal paper as such?
So I have a 4x5 enlarger myself. So I enlarged up. I think the largest I've done is 16x20, but obviously that big of a format can go bigger. So this is inherently a negative process, just like film. Although I know people have experimented with shooting them as a positive, but for the most part, and the way I use it is you get a negative, and then yes, you can enlarge that, or you can contact print it, like I did. I recently posted. Maybe I'll post this to the podcast group on Facebook. I did an 8x10, and then you can scan them in. Now if you look at the characteristic curve for these compared to if you could look at the curve for a plate back in the day, the toe is a little different, and I tweaked it so that these would
That's the bit at the bottom which is responding to shadows. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and I tweaked that a little bit so these would have a nice long toes to make it easier to scan. So that's sort of the nod to how I know people use film and plates today, right? You're going to scan them in, so I need to make sure they scan it well, and they do.
That's interesting. See, I'm looking for a reason, really, not to buy an 8x10 camera. But the more I think about making beautiful contact prints with glass plates, I think, that's got to be used for an 8x10 camera.
Yeah, it's flipping awesome. So I recently got a Kodak 2D a few months ago, and it's pretty cool. I mean, it's not convenient, but who shoots film for convenience?
And well, I don't know if it is finally for me, because I'm drying up now. We can buy these things now, not just from your website, but I noticed there is somewhere for us UK listeners, a place I'd never heard of called
Eidetic?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
In Lambeth, there's a email. No, yes, there's a email address, I think, and a phone number.
Yeah. So
are they stocking things? They're stocking boxes.
He is. So he just started stocking. I think he's starting up a small camera store.
Okay.
There's also Schwarzweiss Fotolaber in Dusseldorf, Germany, who's happy to distribute plates to the UK. He's been stocking my plates for since last year, and then I'm also talking to Paul at Analog Wonderland. He's toying with the idea. I know he's moving into a new shop, but you can bug him.
Yeah, we bug him a lot. That'd be good.
Yeah, good. So,
and then in the states, you've got the usual suspects: Freestyle, Bostic, and Sullivan, and the only place out of there I've visited personally is Glass Key Photo out in San Francisco.
Yeah, Glass Key Photo stocks
they're wonderful guys.
Yeah, they're great. These guys are all great. Freestyle stocks them. Blue Moon Camera up in Portland, Oregon. They were my first retailer. Mm-hmm. They stock them. So
that's on my hit list to visit. Is when I go to the Pacific Northwest, go and visit Zeb Andrews and those guys there.
Yeah, those are all good guys up there. They're doing good stuff.
Or you can come directly to your Etsy shop. Is that still correct?
Yes. So I've got an Etsy store, and then I also have an online store on the website itself now. So there's plenty of places to find them.
And they're very reasonably priced. I think $40 for the size I was looking at, my pack of 10 of 4.5s.
Yeah, that's the key. I mean, if this became my day job and I had to depend on income from them, that I might be singing a different tune. But for now,
buy now, folks, before he wants to make money out of this.
I mean, fundamentally, the overriding reason I'm doing this is to make not only dry plates, sort of bring them back, and I say that with a grain of salt because there have been people who make their own stuff, but make dry plates more accessible, kind of like how folks like Mark Osman did for wet plate back a few years ago. Do the same thing for dry plate, and part of that is making them affordable, because I know, especially younger folks who are getting into photography, which film photography is real popular with. They don't have a lot of money, and I don't want to take their hard-earned money. I just, as long as I'm covering my material costs and stocking the beer fridge and covering the cost of the hobby, which keeps my wife happy, that's good enough for me for now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's awesome what you're doing.
Thank you.
More power to your elbow, as we say.
Yeah. So,
Simon.
Well, I think we should round up now.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, it's been great having you on the show.
Oh, it's been great talking to you guys.
And we're going to have to reschedule something sooner rather than later, I would suggest, in that we have got this question that's been put to us ages ago that we need to answer, and we can also put something.
I think we could. Well, I think it would be good to have a show devoted to lenses. I know you kind of covered this a bit on your other show, Simon, but just for large format, we probably ought to have one. And Jason seems the ideal guy to have on, really.
And we can put it out there for that people can put in questions and stuff like that. So I think we should do that in the relatively near future. So we'll let you have your holiday.
Absolutely.
You're going on tomorrow, I think.
Yeah, we're flying out tomorrow. So our first real actual vacation in years. So we're going out to Hawaii.
Now he's made all his money from selling wet plates.
No. Unfortunately, that's. I would like to say, my focus these days right now is making sure that the Kickstarter campaign is successful. So please, if you think you might be interested in dry plates, shooting dry plates, and a new holder sounds like a good idea, please don't wait. Go ahead and support the campaign. if the campaign isn't successful, then the holders won't happen. That's the long and short of it. So
yeah. Well, we hope so. As I said earlier, we're a week away from airing this show, and at the time of recording, we are 79.8%, 69.8%,
79.67.
Yes,
I did math.
70%.
I think since we've been on air, something just moved on another one. I think.
Did it?
Yeah, 193 backers. I'm sure it was on 192 before. So our positivity is clearly
Sending the
spreading,
vibes,
even though
the
people don't
vibes
actually
through the
hear this.
internet.
Oh yeah, it's yeah, that's good karma. Yeah, it's done really well. We're a week into the campaign, a week and a day into the campaign. We're at 80%. That's great, and people who kind of knew that we were going to do this. Some of the folks that Steve and I have talked to, they're all excited just as much as we are. So we might actually have to do some real work.
It's going to be great.
Well, I'm going to come back to you in a moment. So because I think we just want to say thanks to those people that have donated to the show via our coffee page. That's ko-fi.com. And in particular, since the last podcast went out, Christopher J. May has dropped us some coffee. And he's also given us a note, and he's saying I recently added a Toyo 45A to my large format stable.
Good man.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because of life's busyness at the moment, there's no. See, I'm dyslexic. I struggle to read. I don't know what I'm doing. I always have to do this bit. But there's no time to use it so far. Still, listening to the LFPP, especially with guests like Joseph Brunges, gives me hope that one day I'll actually use it. Thank you. Thank you, Christopher. Yeah, it's. I mean, it's an absolute pleasure doing this show, despite having to do it with Andrew. And, our guests are invariably interesting, and certainly from my perspective, it goes from both of us. But I mean, I've learned so much just by taking part in the show, and I know that every time we talk to somebody, Andrew learns something too. So it just shows that there's so much out there in variety for people to pick up. So it's just great to be able to do this.
It is.
Right, so we'll do the Monty question soon, when that is. So have you got any shout outs this week, Andrew?
No, don't think so.
No.
I never remember to think about shout outs. There will be people to shout out.
I know one. And this is a joint one for both of us, and that's Wayne Setzer. He sent the Docker imprint to us both.
Oh, we did. Yes,
he did, and we should have mentioned this last fortnight.
Got it here actually.
Yeah, and I've got mine in front of me as well. A lovely waterfall scene. I don't know if it was done in Caffenol or not, but I guess it was, and it's very, very nice.
I've got one which is sort of a generic postcard with a number of his images on, which says photographs by Wayne Setzer with his picture on with a waterfall, and then he sent me another one, Lighthouse Stairs. Is that one? Did he send that one to you?
No.
This is on Ilford postcard paper. Andrew, thanks for inviting me on the podcast. I had a great time. Wayne. And a picture of some spiral stairs. So thank you, Wayne. That's brilliant. And I've got to send you something, but I just haven't got around to it. Yeah. So we accept all
relieved.
Sorts. We accept all sorts in the post. Just saying, Jason.
Actually, there is another one from our Facebook group, which is the Large Format Photography Podcast Facebook group, and this came in by his username is Ren Bennells, but I do believe it's actually Ben Reynolds. And he's suggested to us that we should go weekly. He's complaining that he's having to wait 2 weeks in between podcasts. And as I responded, sometimes I want to go weekly, sometimes Andrew wants to go weekly, but neither of us ever want to do it at the same time. And
currently, I'm thinking monthly.
Exactly, yeah, it's too often at the moment for Andrew. So yeah, you're gonna have to wait that extra week. So just play it more slowly. I mean, you can play these things in double time, can't you, and listen to them? Well, play them at half speed. and make it last. Yep, I think that's it for this week's shout outs. So back to Jason. In fact, actually, I think let's go back to Steve Lloyd, who's no longer with us. But that doesn't
he's not dead; he's just left.
And he's out there doing something as we speak, and he has a website which is Chroma.Camera. Which is quite a remarkable website because it's not .com or anything like that. It is literally just Chroma, as in CHROMA.camera, and you will get his website, which I think is a cracking web address. So that's how you get to his site, and I think there are ways of contacting there. He's also on Instagram and on Twitter. I'm not sure what his handles are actually. I think he might be down as Chroma on Chroma Camera on Instagram, and I think he's on Twitter.
Yeah, I think he is.
Let's see. See if he's using the same name. At Chroma Camera on Twitter. So so if you want to get in touch with him or see more about his camera, and there's also information on. I think there's information on the dry plates there. Or is there? You know what? I don't think there is. Well, that's another thing in itself. That because, as has been mentioned several times, there is a live Kickstarter that will still be live even when this podcast goes out.
Yes.
So if you go to Kickstarter, and at the moment, whenever I go onto Kickstarter, it actually comes up there as recommended. It's always at the top. But I assume, nice. Would you, if you just did a search for
ChromaGraphica, ChromaGraphica, you should find it.
That's it. So
I'll send you guys a link so you can link to that.
Yeah, that'd be great. So yourself, Jason, how can people get in touch with you, see what kind of things that you do, whether it be on Facebook or Instagram or all of those places, or your website?
So on Facebook, I have a Facebook group called Dry Plate Photographers that I started so that people shoot dry plates can sort of share results and notes and stuff like that. And I just want to say it's not exclusive to J Lane dry plates, but if you make your own or anything like that, please come join us, share the results. I'm on Instagram at Pictoriographica, and my website is www.pictoriographica.com. And also, I'd like to give a shout out to my mom and mother-in-law for donating and supporting the campaign.
Excellent.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
And Andrew, would you like to tell people how people can keep up with you?
Yeah, mostly, Simon, it would be through Twitter. That's probably where I'm most active. Remains the one medium that I like most. So that's Warboys Snapper. And you can find me hanging around the large format photography podcast Facebook group quite a bit. And Instagram as well as Warboy Snapper, or you can, if you're interested in pinholes, Warboy Snapper _ pinholes, and you can catch me most weeks with Corey Cannon on the Lensless podcast.
Okay, and I'm on Twitter as Simon4. I'm still not entirely sure if I really like Twitter or not, but I am there, and you can get hold of me that way. I'm a little bit more positive about Instagram, and you can find me as Simon Forster Photographic on Instagram. But my favourite places are to be, main place is going to be on Facebook in our group, which is the large format photography podcast group.
It's great, isn't it?
My question, seriously.
Sorry, talking over each other there. So go again there, Jason.
I said they didn't take my question seriously.
Well, actually, you say that. Well, somebody has.
6 comments.
Yeah, somebody has taken your question. Yeah, so the mischief has been made there. So there is at least one serious, there are 2 attempts at serious answers on that one.
Yeah.
Oh,
But no, the group is growing nicely. Is
It is.
480? Is it something like that? It's 400 and odd. Anyway, and very interactive.
Thousands,
and
almost.
Thousands of people.
Almost.
Well, the thing is with the group, I mean, it's not about its size. It's about the quality of. It's about
That's what my wife says.
Yeah, it's about the quality of the people that use the group.
Well, yes,
and
we
I
have a
think
good quality, and the numbers are increasing as well.
They are, and we like people to answer a question before they come in, and
unless you're Jason Lane, who just obviously let in.
Yeah,
I don't remember what my answer was.
Yeah, you actually, I screen captured it, so I may share that later. So thank you for joining and causing mischief. And so that's probably my favourite place. I also do another podcast, which is a weekly podcast called the Classic Lenses Podcast. And as I mentioned earlier, back in episode 64 earlier on this year, it was our pleasure to have Jason as our guest, and anybody that's interested in the design of lenses. I mean, we touched upon the dry plate stuff, but it's really more about the lenses that week. And if anybody's interested in how lenses are designed and constructed and why they do certain weird and wacky things, it's well worth digging out that episode to have a listen to that one. That's it again. Jason, again, it's been great to have you with us.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thanks.
That's it. So that's it for this week. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll be back again in a fortnight. And don't forget to back that Kickstarter. Goodbye.
Goodbye. I was.
The only bit I'm not clear on is exactly how we actually kicked the conversation off after I said hello to you guys. So I'm going to leave that over to Andrew, because I've got a long start bit here. So once Jason said hello, or what's up bitches, or whatever he's going to say, then I think Andrew can take over from there, and we'll just go from there. How does that sound, Andrew?
Sounds like a cop-out to me, mate. Excuse my
That's
French.
pretty much exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, well, that's the plan. Right, I need to calm down now, so I'm going to be able to start.
On your game face.
Yeah, I've got to do that now. Oh, dear.